Our guest speaker is Reverend Dr. Sharri Johnson, and she's one of my co-conspirators over there at the affiliated New Thought Network.
Did you
Uh,
do that on purpose?
well, it happens. It happens. And she has had a long and illustrious career, several of them, in fact. If it will make you nervous, it's nice to know that she was a professor of computer science in college for quite some time. Wrote a textbook about it. Gave all that up. She's now doing ministry. She's the founder of the One Heart Retreat Center. She lives within spitting distance of Unity Village, and delighted to have her here to speak with us this morning. Reverend Dr. Jerry McMurray.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here. The music is fabulous, by the way. And I am Reverend Dr. Sharri McMurray. And for 4.5 years, I was the senior minister, lead faculty, CEO, and business manager of One Heart Retreat Center in 2 hours from everything, Arkansas. My talk today is about the survival technique and the spiritual practice that made it possible for me to be all of that and to consciously evolve into the next phase of my life, where my ministry is still One Heart Retreats, but it's online. That practice is presence. I figured since it's Christmas time, I ought to talk about presence, and it's spelled a little differently, but it's the same principle. I'll give you just a little bit of background. On October 14, 2017, my husband and I arrived at One Heart with a moving van, a rental trailer, 2 dogs, and a cat. 5 months and 5 days later, my husband was diagnosed with acute small cell lung cancer that had metastasized to his brain, his spine, his liver, and his adrenals. He made his transition exactly 1 month later. My previous career was as an academic. I taught college for 35 years, but my husband had been in hotel management for over 40 years. We had it all figured out. He was the business person, and I was the God person. And then all of a sudden, just like that, I was the person, which gave a whole new meaning to the term on-the-job training. My first tactic was to use Kris Kringle's advice to the Frost King in the story of Santa Claus. He said, just put one foot in front of the other. Just keep putting one foot in front of the other, and soon you'll be walking across the floor, etc., etc., etc. And we had done, my husband and I, a lot of planning. And I had a great board of trustees, so once the shock wore off, that technique worked. It worked for the business of One Heart. But it left me feeling spiritually stranded and completely stumped. I was, however, blessed with a marvelous mentor who helped me stay awake and focused, plus 2 prayer partners, one of whom was my prayer partner for over 17 years. This was the beginning of my God Squad, the folks who both model and support me in expressing and experiencing genuine presence. Over that next 4.5 years, the squad grew to 5 prayer partners and an accountability partner. I still have the accountability partner. They're not just prayer partners anymore, though. Now they're presence and intention partners. I have an equation for you from my background in computing and math. You don't have to remember it. It's very simple. Intention plus presence yields manifestation. Understand, please, that one foot in front of another thing has a couple of really important components. The first one is that you have to stay focused, which is just another word for present. And the second is that the attitude of gratitude makes that focus possible. At first, I stayed really busy so I wouldn't notice how alone I was, but eventually that just stopped working. The advice I got from every quarter was to make friends with the loneliness. Yeah, right. First, I had to get used to the idea that I was actually dealing with physical isolation. Of course, this turned out to be really great prep for COVID. Believe it or not, it was almost simple and easy. And bear in mind, simple and easy are not synonyms. I had a prayer room in my little cabin in 2 hours from everything, Arkansas. And as I started my morning there every day of the world, when I realized I needed to turn there for self-care and grief, I set up a prayer altar that, because divine order is always in process, ended up under an uncurtained window that overlooked a tiny little park on my property. There were a multitude of birds, including cardinals, after whom the park was named, plus armadillos, raccoons, and squirrels, and occasionally a deer in this little park. And this little park was not quite half a city block. And when I sat in meditation, their movement drew me out of myself, out of my little cabin, and into the beauty of nature. Looking out reminded me that I'm clearly not alone. In addition to dogs and cat, I lived with birds, wildlife, and cows who lived just the other side of the park. And that was the first gift of my grieving, the first of my presence. That view is the only thing from 2 hours outside of everything, Arkansas, that I really miss. It was a little kiss of heaven every day. And as I allowed myself to feel the beauty that surrounded me, I began to have a glimmer of the beauty that was within me. My prayer practice went from 1 hour to 2 hours, and they flew by every morning. Good morning prayers followed by reading from 8 or 9 books and booklets, including both the daily guides from the Science of Mind magazine and Unity's Daily Word. I'm a true interfaith person. Then 15 to 30 minutes of meditation. This routine gave me such an experience of the fullness, of the numinous presence that surrounded me, that I just naturally allowed a spring of it to well up within me too. I didn't so much get used to the idea of isolation as allow it to fade from my awareness as a negative thing. Isolation was transformed from a loneliness to solitude. Totally different thing. My altar also has a collection of votive candles that represent attributes of divinity that I aim to embody, such as love, life, wisdom, guidance, joy, and inspiration. At one point, a guest at the retreat center left behind a little frosted glass candle holder with the word gratitude etched on it, together with a picture of a little present, a little gift. This was the second present of presence that joined me in the collection on my prayer altar. Excuse me. I said earlier that the attitude of gratitude makes focus possible. Actually, that attitude is what directs the focus inward and upward, which is all that's really required to move from observation to awareness to presence. It turns out, at least in my experience, that presence is absolutely focused on or in the present moment. Presence. It's not possible to be present in the past, not even 1 second ago. And it is not possible to be present in the future, not even the very next breath you're going to take. So how is gratitude connected to presence? We absolutely can be grateful for the gifts we have received in the past. We can feel grateful for the gifts that we anticipate receiving in the future. However, the feeling part, the feel of the gratitude, can only happen in the present moment. So gratitude requires presence. In fact, feeling anything at all requires presence, because feeling happens when we're focused in the current moment, and it requires our full attention. Oddly enough, at least for me, presence also requires gratitude. It's a two-way street, because it feels so immense, it feels so divine, it feels so beyond separation and into oneness with a capital O. So did I actually make friends with the aloneness? Yeah and no. Yes, because I learned to value the time with myself spent recognizing and experiencing oneness, feeling the joy of knowing I never can actually be alone, much less abandoned. The appreciation of solitude as opposed to solitary existence made COVID just a really small bump in my personal road. I will admit that since my ministry before COVID was already at least 50% online and 30% via Zoom, I had a much smaller adjustment than most ministers. And I didn't make friends with it because I knew that I wanted community. In person, one-on-one community. I wanted a partner. Even more than that, I knew I was supposed to have one. And this is where intention comes into the plan. Remember, intention plus presence. But presence is essential, but as the mathematicians say, it was necessary, but it was not sufficient. Presence wasn't enough. So, of course, what did I do? I turned to prayer, big surprise there, and I looked for guidance. I knew I was where God had brought me. I knew I was doing the work God had given me to do, and that I was making a difference in the consciousness of the place where I was. And I was committed to staying there until God decided I was done. So that's what I prayed. Plus, if it's not really necessary for me to be here to do your work, I would just love to go home. 3 weeks later, 3 weeks, 21 days, I got a phone call from my nearest neighbor who lived 3/4 of a mile down the road, offering to buy my retreat center. And on March 31st, One Heart Retreats moved home to Kansas City. Intention plus presence creates manifestation. And I am absolutely passionate about presence. I know it's the solution to every problem facing me or us or the planet today. When I settled into this knowing, I realized that I needed to be as crystal clear in my intentions as I was in my presence. And as it happens, my very first CSL minister, Reverend Dr. Chris Michaels, had taught me a marvelous, simple, and easy technique for establishing intention. All it requires is some quiet time, a pencil, maybe an eraser, and some paper. That's it. You use these tools to create 3 lists. Each list should be exhaustive. That means nothing is too big or too little to be included, and you don't want to leave anything out. The first list, now remember, I personally am intending my way into a partnership, a relationship. That first list includes everything I desire in that relationship, but this works exactly as well for a new job, a new home, or a new body. The next list, number 2, this one requires brutal honesty with yourself, because this is a list of your deal breakers. What am I not willing to do, be, have, or put up with? And finally, list 3, which I don't know about anybody else, but it was the hardest one for me, because list 3 is the list of what you bring to that situation. When the list is complete, you make it neat. My penmanship is terrible, so I typed it. And then you read it over one time neat, and you put it on your prayer altar, and you leave it there to marinate in the presence that always surrounds the altar. Now, presence will take care of keeping the path clear, so what's the job of intention? That can take many forms, because this is where you create a vacuum in the universe and in your life into which the desired manifestation must be drawn. This is another lesson from Dr. Chris. I decided that I would create a vacuum that could not be resisted. So I gave away my antique double bed with room for me, my little dog, and my cat. And I purchased a queen-size bed that had room for me and the little dog and the cat, and room left over for a partner. Next, I removed all of the out-of-season clothing from my very large closet and moved it all into the closet off my office. Then I put 40 hangers on that empty bar. So now I got 10 feet of closet space for a partner. Then one more little touch. I went into the beautiful 5-drawer cherry chest, which had 24 sweaters in it. And I took every one of them out, hung them gently over the sides of a hanger, and put them off the prayer room closet, and figured that I had made it crystal clear to the universe and to myself just exactly what I was looking for. So there was only one thing left to do. I contacted my prayer partners and my accountability partner, and I described in great detail to each of them the vacuum which I had created. And then I assigned them to join me in praying that vacuum full. After about 6 months, I met an attractive man at my new church, and we really hit it off. We got married just over a year ago, as Bill mentioned, and it turned out that we had been doing exactly the same thing before we ever met. His lists were mental because he has a visual impairment, but that was really the only difference, except for one change. He did one thing I didn't do. He went looking for a new church and came to mine. This sounds too good to be true, doesn't it? And that's because when we get out of the way, when we stay fully present, and when we have clear, consistent intentions, the universe just naturally falls in line, or maybe in love with us. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a delight to be here. Namaste.